We spend so much time worrying about what other people think of us, what obstacles are in our way, and what's holding us back from success. But what if I told you that your biggest enemy isn't your boss, your circumstances, your lack of money, or even your competition? Your biggest enemy is the person you see in the mirror every morning. The voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, smart enough, or capable enough. This story will show you how to defeat that enemy once and for all. In downtown Seattle lived a talented graphic designer named Jason. He was 26 years old and worked at a small marketing agency, but his real dream was to start his own design studio. Jason had incredible talent. His designs were creative, professional, and always impressed clients. His co-workers often came to him for advice, and his boss frequently relied on his skills for the most important projects. But despite his obvious abilities, Jason never took the leap to start his own business. Every time he thought about it, a voice in his head would start talking. "Who are you kidding?" the voice would say. "You don't have enough experience to run a business. You'll probably fail within the first year. What if clients don't like your work? What if you can't handle the pressure? You're better off staying where you are, playing it safe." This voice had been with Jason for as long as he could remember. In high school, it told him he wasn't smart enough to apply to art school. In college, it convinced him he shouldn't enter design competitions. At his job, it whispered that he didn't deserve promotions or raises. Jason's girlfriend, Emma, constantly encouraged him to pursue his dreams. "You're the most talented designer I know," she would say. "Your portfolio is amazing. You should at least try." But Jason always had excuses. "The market is too competitive," he would reply. "I don't have enough money saved up. Maybe next year when I'm more prepared." Emma would shake her head in frustration. "Jason, you've been saying next year for 3 years now. What are you really afraid of?" But Jason couldn't answer that question, even to himself. One Friday evening, Jason was working late at the office, putting finishing touches on a campaign for a major client. The building was empty except for the security guard. As Jason walked past the bathroom, he noticed that the large mirror inside had cracked right down the middle, creating 2 distinct reflections. Something about the broken mirror fascinated him. He stood there looking at his split reflection, and for some reason he started talking to it. "Why don't you just quit and start your own business?" he said to his reflection, trying to practice what he might say to Emma when he got home. But then something strange happened. Instead of moving on, Jason found himself responding as if he were having a conversation with himself. "Because I'm not ready yet," he said, representing the voice that always held him back. "When will you be ready?" he asked his reflection. "I need more experience, more money, more connections," the fearful voice replied. "How much more do you need? You've been designing for 6 years. You have a great portfolio. Clients love your work. But what if I fail? What if I'm not as good as I think I am?" Jason stared at his broken reflection and realized he was having the argument that had been going on in his head for years. But now, seeing it played out in front of the cracked mirror, he could see how ridiculous it was. "So you'd rather guarantee failure by never trying than risk failure by actually pursuing your dreams?" Jason asked his fearful reflection. The fearful voice was quiet for a moment, then said, "At least if I don't try, I can still believe I might have succeeded. If I try and fail, then I'll know for sure that I'm not good enough." Jason felt a chill as he realized the truth. He wasn't afraid of failure. He was afraid of finding out his limitations. As long as he didn't try, he could maintain the fantasy that he was capable of great things. But if he tried and failed, that fantasy would be shattered. "But what if you succeed?" Jason asked his reflection. "What if you're actually better than you think you are? What if your fear is wrong?" The conversation continued for several minutes, with Jason literally arguing with himself in front of the broken mirror. The confident Jason presented evidence of his abilities, while the fearful Jason presented worst-case scenarios and excuses. Finally, the confident Jason said something that stopped the argument cold. "The only way you'll ever know what you're capable of is if you try. And if you fail, at least you'll fail trying to build something you believe in, instead of succeeding at playing it safe in a life that doesn't excite you." The security guard walked by and saw Jason talking to himself in the bathroom mirror. "You okay in there, buddy?" Jason snapped back to reality, embarrassed. "Yeah, sorry, just thinking out loud." But as he walked back to his desk, Jason realized something had shifted. For the first time, he had clearly heard both voices in his head, the one that pushed him forward and the one that held him back. And he realized that he had been letting the wrong voice make his decisions. That weekend, Jason sat down and wrote a business plan. Not a perfect one, but a real one. He calculated how much money he needed to save, identified potential clients, and set a timeline for starting his own studio. Emma was amazed. "What changed?" she asked. "I realized I've been fighting a war inside my head, and I was letting the wrong side win," Jason replied. Over the next 6 months, Jason systematically addressed every excuse his fearful voice presented. Not enough money? He took on freelance projects and saved aggressively. Not enough connections? He started networking and attending design meetups. Not enough experience? He volunteered to design materials for local nonprofits to build his portfolio. Most importantly, every time the fearful voice tried to discourage him, Jason would remember the conversation with his reflection in the broken mirror. He would acknowledge the fear, but then ask himself, "Is this fear protecting me from real danger, or is it just trying to keep me in my comfort zone?" Usually, it was the latter. 9 months after the mirror conversation, Jason quit his job and launched Rainier Design Studio, named after the mountain that dominated Seattle's skyline. His first month was terrifying. He had only 2 small clients and barely made enough to cover his expenses. But Jason had learned to recognize the difference between his fearful voice and his intuitive voice. His fear told him to panic and look for a job. His intuition told him to stay focused and keep marketing his services. By the end of his first year, Jason's studio was profitable. By the end of his second year, he had hired 2 employees and was working with clients he had only dreamed of reaching while at his old job. Looking back, Jason realized that his biggest obstacle had never been his competition, his lack of connections, or even his financial situation. His biggest obstacle had been the voice in his head that told him he couldn't succeed. The truth is, we all have 2 voices inside us. One voice is our inner critic. It focuses on what could go wrong, what we lack, and why we should play it safe. The other voice is our inner champion. It focuses on our potential, our strengths, and the possibilities that await us if we're brave enough to try. Most people let their inner critic make their life decisions. They stay in jobs they don't love because their critic tells them they're not qualified for better. They avoid relationships because their critic tells them they're not worthy of love. They abandon dreams because their critic tells them they'll probably fail anyway. But successful people have learned to recognize both voices and choose which one to follow. They acknowledge their fears without letting those fears control their choices. Your inner critic isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect you from disappointment and rejection. But in trying to protect you from failure, it's also protecting you from success. The next time you find yourself making excuses or talking yourself out of pursuing something you want, stop and ask yourself, which voice is talking right now? My critic or my champion? Then choose to listen to the voice that believes in your potential instead of the one that focuses on your limitations. Your biggest enemy has always been you. But here's the good news. Your biggest ally is also you. And you get to choose which version of yourself you listen to. If this story inspired you to start listening to your inner champion instead of your inner critic, give it a like and share what dream you're going to stop making excuses about in the comments. Remember, the only person who can defeat your biggest enemy is you.